it's all about supply and demand, and if there is not a level of supply for the firms, they would want to hire foreigners. For example, in the USA, it's like low-skilled labor is so needed there, but there are such regulations that don't like don't allow them to work there, like registration, like the migration crisis, like Trump. And would Americans want to work in farms, for example? No. Most of the youngsters would say, I don't want to work in a farm. Would British people want to work in factories? No, they don't want. So there is need to meet the demand for these people and for business owners. So can you elaborate more on the view of regulations for high-skilled labor and low-skilled labor, and which is like easier to be regulated and which is like difficult to be regulated? Thank you.
Would you mind to lecture? It's okay.
Works. The labor market regulations, green cards, blue cards, skilled workers, non-skilled workers, and that sort of stuff, is also a regulation. So it is an attempt to have quotas of different companies, different firms, and that sort of stuff, which eventually, and the green card in Germany is one of the key examples, which eventually reduces the competitiveness of the jurisdiction. And this reduction, this is not necessarily bad. This is bad. This is not necessarily bad for the companies, but this is bad for the overall jurisdiction of Germany, and because Germany is the largest economy of the European Union, this is bad, for the European Union. Why? Because when you don't have workers, like EMI from Bulgaria, they move somewhere outside the European Union. This is one of the secrets of the German exports, of the fact that German cars are being produced all over the globe, that China is one of the major producers of German-born technology or German copyrighted technology. One of the problems is that it cannot be produced in Germany because of the labor regulations, which is generally good, for the companies, as I said. But it is risky for the entire economy of Germany and the entire economy of the European Union, for one very simple reason. In the export-driven economies, the risk is always higher. This is just a miracle and pure luck that Germany is doing okay in terms of exports. This is pure luck for Bulgarians, Bulgarian entrepreneurs, that they are smart enough and they can compensate, for different restrictions, different markets, and for the last 8 years, the export is one of the major growth factors. So for some years, for 6 years of this 10, of this 8, it was the major factor. In the last 2 years, it's second major factor after domestic consumption. But the export-driven economy, especially if it is somehow made reasonable, necessitated by restrictions, it's a risky situation. And for this reason, the European Union is trying, to change things, and for this reason they fail, because nobody will dare, no political party will dare fixing quickly the labor market regulations or the welfare system, because the party which promises this won't be elected.
Other questions? So
basically, one question I wanted to ask is that we saw in Germany there was a massive influx of migration. And as a reaction to that, we had parties like Alternative for Deutschland, which had massive clout during the past elections. They basically went from not participating in politics into being a very important party in the scene. And so this is seen as regulatory action from the people's side because they chose to vote for a party that talked about immigration since they weren't agreeing with the policy. So what can you comment about movements like this that are sort of people's reaction to a very open policy to migration?
Well, I think that was my concern, and I think it's everybody's concerns here. But I very much like this notion of what a club good is. For economists, it would be quite a familiar notion where the rivalry exists. So, on the contrary of a private good, where you cannot, where you can exclude, of course, others from benefiting from it, you do have the possibility here to take into account the fact that rivalry will diminish the overall benefits you may have from participating into this club. I'm sorry. So the way our societies are presented, they are machines of or frameworks of redistributing, and that's the key word here: redistributing. Redistributing benefits because you are part of the club. Now, from a moral point of view and from an economic point of view, if we understand the study of the economy as the harmonious way to perform in the best possible way within the constraints, under the constraints which we experience. From this point of view, it's a very, very simple rule, and I want to react to the first question. It's not a regulation. The regulation will include an element of discretion, and this element of discretion will necessarily be a subjective one. We're based on, and this is what pro-market and free market policy would be, and within the word policy there is also the element of education and the element of incentives would be that of objective rules. And the basic rule of a free market, of a free society, would be don't do that to others which you don't want them to do to you. It has been, of course, the real world has a momentum effect, so there is a lot of inertia, and this inertia has been building up and building up and building up for decades. It has started with Bismarck. I just want to recall, to remind you, so you recall, the concept of a nation state is a century and a half old, right? Humanity, ever since Auntie Lucy, that we found out she lived 3 million years ago somewhere in Tanzania, walking around with a wooden stick, she didn't need any nationality. Of course, there were elements of rivalry within the clan she was living with, or other clans. So competition in the negative, destructive, supposedly way of meaning of the word was present, definitely. But we do build upon something which is artificially created. And the more you have promises, as the example here of the parties not being elected for saying what the real constraints are, the more you have promises, the more you need to fulfill those promises, the more you will be looking for your medium voter. So there will be necessarily a shift now towards those xenophobic and openly racist sentiments, and we shall not, and this is one of the reasons why those events, events like this one here exist, is to warn against this mounting, this increasing danger, which is we are submerged by this wave. we know, and the examples of the unsustainability of our welfare system are salient, they are alarming. We cannot continue with this way. We have to break the system. This system needs a fundamental change. It is a challenge which you cannot, I mean, our friends in France, they are on strike right now for the last 3 weeks. In Germany and elsewhere, they have to know that, well, this golden age of where you do nothing and you're fed with a silver spoon on somebody else's expenses, that's over.
Can we look at the details? Who told you that there is a massive influx of refugees in Germany?
Well, it's actually statistics.
Sorry?
There is.
Statistics.
Statistics?
Yes.
What statistics?
Just annual reports of migration movements data.
No, I mean, just name the source.
Uh,
There is a
it's been
statistic
all
of
over
asylum
the-
seekers which is kept by the European Union. You go and visit. So the peak year, 2015 I guess, was about 776,000 asylum seekers. These are the refugees. They are not accepted, they are not given the status. So the entire whatever amount of these asylum seekers is 3 times less than the number of Turkish gastarbeiters who came in the 60s, yes? So it's 3 times less. Suppose you have 1 million of asylum seekers or refugees. This is 1 person per 500 persons of citizens of the European Union. What's the problem? So only after the World War II, the migrants, from East Germany to West Germany were 4.5, 5 million. Yeah? Within the countries of today, European Union, the migrants after the Second World War were about 26 or 27 million. If you take the Balkans, so the displaced person and internal migration of ex-Yugoslav countries is about 800,000 for 6 months. So, and somebody tells me that there is a massive influx. There is no massive influx. And if you look at the details, who are the asylum seekers? 165,000 are from Kosovo, Albania, and Macedonia. So the actual number of asylum seekers, from other cultures is roughly about 500-something thousand, which basically means, they're less in number than the press or Alternative for Germany claims. So what is the problem with asylum seekers now, or the refugees now? The problem is that they don't have, like the internal Balkan refugees, they don't have the social capital, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the knowledge of language. And sometimes, they're from other culture. So that different culture is no problem because of the numbers. This different culture is a problem because these people are kept in one separated or several separated places. They are concentrated. They are not spread. They are not being spread around the countries. If they find a job around the country, there are different circumstances to do so. If they are spread around the countries, nobody will see them. If they are concentrated in ghettos, then Volen Sidorov can catch a TV crew and go and create a problem in Harmony. So I claim, that the refugees in Bulgaria are 22,000. This is not true. The statistics is very different. 22, 23,000 cross Bulgaria, helped by the border police and other, because it's a business, as I said, even under communism, you couldn't protect the borders. So, of those 26,000 or so, in Bulgaria remained about 9,000. 9,000 is a peanuts, for Bulgaria, especially under the situation of the labor market. So what is the problem? The problem is that these people are concentrated. You select the best guys from this room, especially the men, and you put them in one room for about 20 days, and they will be fighting with one another. And what if you have these guys, from different nations or different religions, or different Muslim denominations? Sunnis will be fighting Shia, and Shia will be fighting Sunnis. There is only one mosque in the world where Sunnis and Shia, go together to pray, and this is in Tbilisi. So they will be fighting. Probably those who study anthropology here know the so-called law of Margaret Reed. So the Reed law says that if you have idle male population for more than 3 weeks, you are going to have a trouble. So this is the trouble. So,